We are going to make sure we maintain the integrity of our voters. We are going to make sure we maintain the integrity of the election system, and we're going to do it by saying if you can show a picture to buy Sudafed, if you can show a picture to get on an airplane, you should be able to show a picture to make sure that we do what is incredibly inherent in our freedoms, and that is the ability to vote.
Pandering. We're back. That was South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley back in May, right after she signed a new voter identification bill into law. Since then, there have been complaints by many South Carolinians that the law will effectively end up disenfranchising many traditionally Democratic supporters in the state. And a new study just released by the Associated Press backs up many of those claims by proving that blacks in the state of South Carolina will be hit the hardest by the new photo ID requirements. The Department of Justice is currently looking into whether or not the South Carolina law violates the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But will the law stand up to the increased scrutiny, or will it ultimately be nullified? Judith Brown Dionis is the co-founder of the Advancement Project, and Dick Harpootlian is the chairman of the South Carolina Democratic Party. Dick, I want you to start this. When did this idea come about? I know you have a very hard time winning general elections down here on the Democratic side for president these recent years, but why are the Republicans getting so randy to roll up the vote, if that's what they're up to?
Well, I think two reasons, Chris. They saw what happened here in 2008. Huge African-American turnout because of President Obama. And they're wanting to do whatever they can to diminish that. And the way you do that is and remember now, we've got a couple 100,000 people who are registered to vote but don't have picture IDs. They don't have a driver's license. They don't have any ID. And to go get that, they're going to have to pay money for a birth certificate. And many of these people are poor. So the idea, Nikki Haley's idea was, why would we have to convince these people to vote for somebody? Let's just make sure they don't vote. Poll tax, literacy test, an old South Carolina tradition.
Yeah, suppose you're 80 years old. Start with that group. 80 to 90, you're surviving. You're an older person. Elderly, right? Imagine you got to go haul yourself down to some government agency, spend $20-some bucks or whatever it is, try to find where you go. Mm-hmm. Then you have to find out where you go next. Then you have to find out where you go next, all in the pursuit of being able to vote.
That's right. And it becomes the barrier to voting. I mean, you think about the elderly people who have to go find their birth certificate, a marriage license, get public transportation to get there. It becomes the barrier. It's the easy way out. This is nothing but old-time voter suppression. A state legislature puts in place laws that are going to block African Americans and Latinos from voting, and then it hits the elderlies and students. I mean, South Carolina, the numbers that came out are startling about the impact that it will have on students, and particularly black students in the state of South Carolina.
Why black students?
Well, black students, because many of them, again, just like, 25% of African Americans in this country do not have state-issued photo identification.
They don't have driver's license.
Many people do not have driver's license. It's not a common thing.
I know. Look, I know big cities, that's the same thing.
That's right.
Let me go back to this Nikki Haley. I don't know what to make of her. She's brand new to politics, Dick, but why would she be so windswept and elitist in her conversation? Most people don't get on airplanes. I think my parents were on an airplane maybe once in their life. I remember when my grandmother took a trip once, the whole family went out to see her off to St. Louis. Not everybody is so frisky as to jump up on airplanes all the time. What is she talking about? Like everybody flies, therefore everybody should have a voter ID card. Who is she now? Where'd she get that from?
She's out of touch with reality. She just got back from a trade mission to Paris, where she spent our money, $22,000 on pâté and champagne for a cocktail party while she was out there, stayed in $600 five-star hotels. She hasn't got a clue, and this makes perfect sense to her. Why should we have to convince African Americans, poor people, students to vote for these crazy programs we have? Just don't let them vote.
Well, let's go to this. I think the ACLU ought to be involved in this, and everybody else, NAACP and everybody. Let me take a look at this. The Associated Press analysis finds that a greater number of voters in South Carolina's majority black counties would not have the identification required by the state. Here it is. The report shows that in Richland County, 50% of those impacted by the new law were non-white voters, while in Orangeburg County, a shocking 73% of those voters affected by the law were non-white. So what are they going to do? What are you going to do about this?
I mean, there are a few things we're doing. In places like South Carolina and Texas, we're filing letters with the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has to pre-clear these laws and approve them before
because they're still covered by voting rights.
That's right. And so we're putting pressure.
Which Rick Perry wants to get rid of.
Right. And Rick Perry, by the way, won't provide the race evidence, the data that the Department of Justice needs. 600,000 people in the state of Texas do not have photo identification, and those are already registered voters. So we're trying to collect that data. We're going to prove to the Department of Justice that they should stand with the Voting Rights Act and protect voters. And then in some places where we think that these laws are we're going to see them again. In North Carolina, we think the legislature will pull it back, and we're going to be fighting it every step of the way.
Dick, how much cheating is there in voting right now? My experience is that the way we monitor elections in this country, there are local people sitting behind a desk. They all know everybody. You come in for them. You vote basically by your local neighborhood. Everybody knows who you are. When you give your address, people know who you are. Your thoughts, Dick. I think that's the way it's done. It isn't perfect, but do we need an ID card system?
Well, not one, Chris, you're right on the money. Not one reported case of voter fraud in this state in the last 10 years. Why all of a sudden it's going to cost $2 million to implement this? It's going to be, as we said, disenfranchise people. So the only explanation, it's got nothing to do with integrity, as she said. It's got everything to do with no integrity.
It smells. Thank you very much, Dick Harpootlian, and thank you, Judith Brown-Deonis. Thank you both for coming on.
Thank you.
I like the right cause here, the good cause.